So right after I did my training, I don't think I'd even been granted my title yet. I don't think I'd even, like, the exams hadn't been graded. I had a client whose builder went out of business and it was messy, and I went to them and said, hey, if you consider letting me build your home, I will, do your design for you, at a discount. And if you let me make it passive house, we'd be really interested in giving you a good deal on the project. And they took the weekend and did their own research. And to their credit, they're incredible clients, DT and Kim. They came back and were like, we're in. We did the research. We think passive house is incredible. And they never really wavered. They just had this kind of undying faith in that approach, which really, of course, galvanized us into our first successful project. Because you do have to, the early adopters require so much more faith, so much more innovation. Well, thankfully, I had a really creative team. My business partner, Randy, is sort of this brilliant, creative scientist, mad scientist type. And so, every time we'd come to one of those hurdles, like, we don't know how we're going to heat the building, or, there's nowhere on the planet we can order a front door from right now. So, me and him would devise a way to build a door, and then we'd find a craftsman to do it. And, they have a custom, 4-inch thick door full of foam that was built by a local craftsman who was like, yeah, I guess I can do that. Weirdos. So it was just one thing after another. And it was definitely like team play. Everybody was solving problems through the whole design. There was definitely a learning curve with the subs. But especially at the time, it was a small building community. It was kind of in the worst of the economic downturn. So in one sense, the subs were hungry and they needed the work. And I think that fostered some positive attitudes about doing something so strange. And then also just like that relationship-based kind of work, where these are people we'd worked with for years. These are people that we respect and they respected us. And so there was a lot of conversation, and certainly some subs were more resistant, but I think in the end, they were actually pretty excited about what they did. A lot of them went on to do, 5, 6, 7, 8 passive houses with us. Yeah, it's a little bit interesting right now because we've transitioned our firm. We were design build, and by the end of September, we'll just be an architecture firm. So I'm feeling this really national excitement that we're kind of able to offer our design services to anybody who wants a passive house. Because before we were really stuck with our region, right, as the builder, and we were very focused about the work that we did. And now I'm getting calls from, Milwaukee and, across the country, New York, Puerto Rico. We're getting a lot of interest in passive house for that niche in a much more broad national sense. And I think that's indicative of the movement, not just our work, but what's happening to everybody right now. I think compared to like trying to integrate, geothermal with, a solar thermal system and photovoltaics and all these, attempts to try and solve it with technology instead of just best building practices, that still felt more complicated to me, because if you solve a door, the door is well built and it's going to last 200 years. If I solve the geothermal question, those systems are going to begin to deteriorate in 30, 40, 50 years. It's not a long-term solution. So I think the simplicity for me was having a longer view, in addition to actual, the building is actually simpler. And it definitely feels simpler now. I mean, certainly every building is a challenge, especially some of the architecture we do is not the easiest passive houses to build. But there's still, I think, a simplicity to the shell being what your attention and your energy goes into. As opposed to technology or systems layering on top of that. I think there's still a simplicity to build a really good building and use really good materials. And that still really resonates, I think, with me and my team. Oh, yeah. I think most of the people that I trained with, I would consider my friends to this day. Many of them I visit when I go to Portland or Seattle, and definitely see them at the Passive House conferences and get beers afterwards and all that fun stuff. I've never had exposure in the architecture community where I made so many friends or felt such a sense of peership. I think Passive House is really unique that way. You know, I hear people say a rising tide raises all boats, a rising tide floats all boats, and I think it's really true. I don't feel like people, you know, like protect their details or have a sense of ownership to what they're doing. I feel like in a true sense, it's actually a community. I definitely feel like it's more open source and more open to that kind of conversation than any of the other architecture, you know, events or things that I go to.